Blood stained the inside of Emily Drake's mouth as she bit her cheek to stay conscious, the boardroom spinning violently around her. 3 cracked ribs screamed beneath her blouse, while 12 executives watched her presentation, none noticing how her makeup concealed the bruises her powerful colleague had left when she'd finally said no. She'd survived this long. She could survive 10 more minutes. Then her body betrayed her. As darkness crashed over her vision, Emily didn't collapse to the floor. She fell directly into the arms of Seoul's most dangerous man, Taeho's CEO, Seo Jin-woo, whose obsidian eyes widened with recognition as her sleeve slipped, revealing the violent constellation of fingerprints wrapped around her wrist. "Everyone out," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper, yet instantly obeyed. "Now." The brutality that flashed across Jin-woo's usually controlled features wasn't just anger, it was promise, the kind that made men disappear in this city. His fingers traced her pulse with an unexpected tenderness. "Who did this to you?" he asked, the question carrying weight beyond its words. Emily's eyes locked with his, finding something unexpectedly familiar in his fury. He wasn't seeing a victim. He was seeing someone who had survived exactly what he understood all too well, and that made him infinitely more dangerous than the man who had hurt her. If you are listening right now, please subscribe to Heart of Seoul, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Emily's throat constricted as Jin-woo's gaze lingered on the exposed bruises. Recognition dawned in his eyes, not of the marks themselves, but of their specific pattern, the particular cruelty required to create them. "You won't tell me," he said, statement rather than question, "because the system already failed you once." Her heartbeat stuttered. How could he possibly know? His thumb brushed across her wrist so gently it almost hurt. "Then I'll find out myself." The words weren't a comfort. They were a promise that sent ice through her veins. Because in that moment, as rain streaked shadows across his face, Emily realized she hadn't fallen into safety. She'd fallen into the hands of a man who solved problems permanently, and he had just decided she was his to protect. What terrified her most wasn't the danger lurking beyond the boardroom walls. It was the inexplicable certainty that, despite everything she knew about Seo Jin-woo, she felt safer in his arms than she had in weeks. And what did that say about how desperate she had truly become? 3 years of meticulously building her career at Taeho Investments had taught Emily how to become invisible when necessary. The daughter of a Nigerian diplomat and a Korean-American professor, she'd learned early how to navigate spaces where she stood out by making herself forgettable, a skill that had served her well as the only Black woman in Taeho's analytics department. She'd crafted her professional persona like armor, efficient, unremarkable, and above all, uncontroversial. Until David Pearson became CFO 6 months ago. The morning after the boardroom incident, Emily stood in her apartment bathroom, cataloging the damage. Purple-yellow bruises bloomed across her ribs where she'd been shoved against her desk corner. Finger marks circled her wrist from when he'd grabbed her too hard after she'd threatened to report his accidental touches. The split lip from when she'd finally fought back had almost healed. "You're fine," she whispered to her reflection. "You're surviving." Her phone buzzed with a text from Min-ji, her closest friend in the office. "Are you alive? Everyone's talking about you fainting into the Jin-woo's arms. He canceled all meetings today. Call me." Emily's stomach clenched. She hadn't merely created a scene, she'd created it with the one man in Seoul whose attention nobody wanted. Rumors about Seo Jin-woo circulated constantly, that his family connections extended to the highest levels of government and the deepest corners of Seoul's underground, that Taeho's legitimate business was merely a fraction of his empire, that people who crossed him simply disappeared. Yet something about the way he'd looked at her bruises haunted her, not with pity, but with recognition, like he understood exactly what it meant to hide pain behind performance. Her doorbell rang, startling her so badly she dropped her phone. Nobody ever came here. She'd made certain of that after the first accidental run-in with Pearson outside work. Through the peephole, she saw a petite woman in an impeccable charcoal suit, her posture military straight. "Miss Drake," the woman called through the door. "I'm Soon-ja Park, Mr. Seo's chief of security. He's requested your presence." Not invited, requested. Emily cracked the door, security chain still in place. "I'm taking a sick day." Soon-ja nodded, unsurprised. "Mr. Seo anticipated your response. He asked me to inform you that Mr. Pearson has scheduled an emergency budget meeting tomorrow morning. He intends to eliminate your entire department." Emily's blood ran cold. After she'd rejected him, threatened to expose him, Pearson had promised consequences. She'd been documenting everything, building a case, but how could she fight someone with Pearson's connections to the board? "Why would Mr. Seo care?" Emily asked, voice barely steady. He didn't specify, but something in her expression softened marginally. "However, I've worked for Mr. Seo for 7 years. He notices patterns others miss, and he despises injustice, particularly against those who cannot defend themselves." "I can defend myself," Emily said automatically. Soonja's eyes flickered to the fading bruise visible on her wrist. "Of course, but perhaps you shouldn't have to fight alone." For 3 months, Emily had been drowning in isolation. HR had misplaced her initial complaint. Her former mentor had suggested she was misinterpreting cultural differences. Even Min-ji, though supportive, had warned her about making powerful enemies. The system designed to protect her had instead protected her abuser. "What does Mr. C want from me?" Emily asked, the question that had kept her awake all night. "That's between you and him," Sunja answered. "But I can tell you this, in 7 years, I've never seen him personally intervene in an employee matter." Emily thought of how his arms had felt yesterday, steady when everything else was collapsing, how his eyes had assessed her injuries with a knowledge too intimate to be theoretical. "Give me 20 minutes," she finally said. As she dressed, selecting a high-necked blouse that concealed the worst of the bruises, Emily tried to quiet the voice warning her she was trading one danger for another, because beneath that caution lay an unsettling truth. For the first time in months, someone with actual power had seen her pain and decided it mattered. What she couldn't yet know was how completely Seo Jin-woo was about to dismantle everything she thought she understood about power, protection, and the price of both. Jin-woo's private office occupied the entire top floor of Taeho Tower, a space that felt more like a curated museum than a workplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Seoul's skyline like living art, while centuries-old pottery displayed in recessed lighting contrasted with ultra-modern furnishings, power and tradition seamlessly intertwined. The man himself stood with his back to the door when Emily entered, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the city like a monarch surveying his domain. He didn't turn immediately, leaving her suspended in uncomfortable silence. "Do you know why I started Taeho Investments, Miss Drake?" he finally asked, still facing the window. Emily remained near the door. "To diversify your family's holdings, I assumed." He turned then, studying her with that unnerving intensity. Today he wore a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it seemed molded to his lean frame. Nothing ostentatious, his power required no advertisement. "My grandfather built our family's fortune through means I cannot discuss," he said, moving to a lacquered cabinet where he poured 2 cups of tea.
He offered her a cup, which is why I find it disturbing when those rules are broken. Their fingers brushed during the exchange. Emily tried to ignore the electric awareness that shot through her, inappropriate, unwelcome, and dangerously inconvenient. "Mr. Pearson," she said, cutting to what mattered. Jin-woo's expression hardened. "I've reviewed the security footage for the past 3 months. I've seen the timestamps of your late nights. The elevator camera caught him following you to the parking garage twice." He set down his cup with controlled precision. "What I haven't seen is any record of your HR complaint." Emily's cup trembled slightly. "How did you—" "I own the company, Miss Drake. There is very little I cannot access when motivated."
He guided her to a sitting area, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow felt more intimate than if he'd crowded her. "You have 2 options," Jin-woo said, sliding a folder across the table. "Option 1, transfer papers to our Singapore office, effective immediately. New position, significant promotion, housing allowance included." Emily stared at the offer, mind reeling. Escape, safety, but also surrender. And option 2? Something dangerous flickered across his features. "You stay. I handle Mr. Pearson." Handle him how? Jin-woo's silence was answer enough. "You don't even know me," Emily whispered. "Why would you—" "I know enough." His gaze locked with hers. "I recognize what happens when powerful men believe themselves untouchable." The air between them charged with unspoken understanding. This wasn't just about her situation. This was personal for him, too. Her phone buzzed. A text from Pearson. "Meeting with HR tomorrow. Discussing your emotional instability. Thought you should know." Emily showed Jin-woo the screen, her hand perfectly steady despite the fury unfurling inside her. "They're going to fire me instead of him, aren't they?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Jin-woo didn't insult her with platitudes. "Yes." In that moment, something inside Emily, something that had been bending for months, finally snapped. She'd done everything right, documented the harassment, reported through proper channels, maintained professionalism even as Pearson escalated, and still the system was preparing to discard her. "What happens if I choose neither option?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Jin-woo's expression shifted subtly, a new respect evident in his gaze. "Then we create a third option, together." The word hung between them, laden with implications Emily wasn't ready to examine. "Whatever you decide," Jin-woo added, "you should know Pearson isn't just a danger to you. There have been others before you. There will be more if he remains unchecked." The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. She wasn't his first victim, just the first who'd fought back publicly enough to catch Jin-woo's attention. "I don't want to run," she said finally, pushing the Singapore offer away. "But I won't be responsible for whatever handling you have in mind." Jin-woo studied her for a long moment. "Then I propose an alliance, Miss Drake, with very specific boundaries." "What kind of alliance?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The kind that ensures justice without requiring your conscience to bear the weight of how it's achieved." Over the next week, Emily inhabited 2 separate realities. In one, she performed normalcy, attending meetings, completing projections, avoiding Pearson's gaze across conference tables. In the other, she entered a shadow world where Jin-woo's influence operated like invisible currents beneath Seoul's polished surface. Their alliance began formally enough. Jin-woo assigned Sunja as Emily's assistant, though they both understood the arrangement's true purpose. The security chief's constant presence sent a clear message to Pearson, who suddenly found reasons to maintain his distance.
"He's watching and waiting," Sunja warned as they walked to Emily's car one evening. "Men like him don't surrender territory easily." Emily nodded, having learned that lesson through Bruises. How does Jin-woo know so much about men like Pearson? Sunja's expression revealed nothing. Some knowledge comes at personal cost, Miss Drake. That's all I can say. The answer only deepened the mystery surrounding Jin-woo, a man Emily increasingly couldn't categorize. During their daily briefings in his office, ostensibly about market analytics but actually strategic planning against Pearson, she caught glimpses of complexity beneath his controlled exterior, like how his accent thickened when discussing his grandmother's illness, how his hands, capable of such measured stillness, occasionally betrayed emotion through almost imperceptible tension, how his eyes followed her movements when he thought she wouldn't notice. "The board meeting is tomorrow," Jin-woo said during their Friday briefing, sliding a document across his desk. "Pearson has been quietly gathering support to challenge my acquisition strategy." Emily reviewed the numbers, quickly spotting the manipulation. "He's deliberately misrepresented the projections my team provided. These figures are fraudulent," Jin-woo finished. "Yes, he's growing desperate." "Because of me?" The thought carried a peculiar weight. "Because you refused to be silenced." Jin-woo's gaze held unexpected warmth. Few have that courage. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition beyond their tactical alliance. Emily looked away first, uncomfortable with how easily he dismantled her carefully constructed barriers. "There's something else you should see," he said, unlocking a drawer to retrieve a red file. "The previous complaints against Pearson, they've been eliminated from official records." The file contained statements from 4 women over 3 years. Each case followed the same pattern: initial complaint, gaslighting, intimidation, then either resignation or termination, system-sanctioned predation. "How did you get these?" Emily whispered. "I have connections at his previous companies." Jin-woo's tone carried an edge. "But Pearson has protection too, someone powerful enough to make evidence disappear across multiple corporations. Who? That's what we need to discover." The partnership implied in that "we" sent an inappropriate thrill through Emily. Dangerous, she reminded herself. No matter how differently he treated her, this man operated outside the law when it suited him. That evening, working late in her office, Emily sensed rather than heard someone enter. She looked up, expecting Sunja. Instead, Pearson stood in her doorway, his expression a masterpiece of professional concern. "Working late again, Emily?" His voice carried the false warmth that had once preceded his worst behavior. Emily's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Mr. Pearson, did you need something?" He stepped closer, stopping at the invisible boundary Sunja's presence had established all week. "Actually, I came to apologize. This tension between us, it's all been a misunderstanding." Emily remained silent, watching him.
"I spoke with Chairman Kang today," Pearson continued, dropping the name with deliberate casualness. "He was quite concerned about your allegations, suggested we resolve things amicably." Chairman Kang, Jin Yoon's supposed mentor on the board of directors. The connection struck Emily like cold water. Was this Jin Yoon's protection, or had she misread everything? "We both know Seo's interest in you is temporary," Pearson added, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Once he's finished with whatever game he's playing, you'll need allies. I can be very forgiving, Emily." The threat beneath the olive branch couldn't be clearer. After he left, Emily's phone buzzed with a text from Jin Yoo. "My driver is downstairs. Come to my home. We need to talk where no one is listening." 20 minutes later, her car stopped before a traditional Hanok house, its elegant wooden architecture nestled incongruously among Seoul's modern skyline. Jin Yoo waited at the entrance, his usual suit replaced by casual clothes that somehow made him more rather than less intimidating. "Pearson approached you," he stated rather than asked, guiding her through a courtyard garden where water flowed over sculpted stone. "How did you know?" "Because Chairman Tang called me immediately after meeting him." Jin Yoo's expression darkened. "Pearson is testing boundaries, seeing how far my protection extends." And how far does it extend? Emily asked, the question encompassing more than she intended. Jin-woo stopped walking, turning to face her directly. In the garden's gentle lighting, the hardness that typically defined him softened just enough to reveal something else beneath, something wounded and fierce and carefully guarded. Farther than he could imagine, Jin-woo answered quietly, and for reasons he would never understand. Jin-woo's home revealed the man beneath the CEO facade. Ancient family heirlooms shared space with modern art. Books in multiple languages lined custom shelves. It was a space of carefully curated contradictions, much like its owner. 7 years ago, Jin-woo said as he poured soju into small traditional cups, my sister worked at Daiwon Financial. Pearson was a consultant there. Emily's breath caught. Your sister was one of his victims. Jin-woo's composure slipped momentarily, revealing raw pain. Jisoo filed complaints, followed procedure, trusted the system. He handed Emily a cup, their fingers brushing. She took her life 3 days after being terminated for performance issues. The revelation landed like physical impact. That's why you intervened with me. Initially, yes, Jin-woo's gaze held hers. I recognize the pattern, but my continued involvement is less straightforward. Before Emily could process this, Jin-woo's security chief appeared at the doorway. Sir, we've been compromised. The surveillance photos from Miss Drake's building, someone accessed them remotely. Jin-woo's expression hardened instantly. Lock down our networks, now. As Sunja departed, Jin-woo turned to Emily. We've been gathering evidence against Pearson and whoever's protecting him. Photos, testimonies from previous victims willing to come forward, financial records showing payoffs.
And someone knows, Emily finished, understanding dawning. Is it Chairman Kang? Possibly, but there's something bigger. Jin-woo activated a wall screen displaying complex financial data. While investigating Pearson, we discovered irregular fund movements through Taeho's overseas accounts, money laundering hidden under acquisition deals. Emily studied the patterns, her analyst mind automatically connecting dots. These transfers align with Pearson's previous employment transitions. Yes, he's not just a predator, he's a financial criminal inserted into companies to facilitate money movement. Jin-woo's expression darkened. And he knows we're close to proving it. The realization struck Emily suddenly. That's why Pearson approached me today. He's desperate to know how much we've uncovered. Which means you're now a target beyond workplace harassment, Jin-woo confirmed. They can't risk exposure of the larger operation. Cold fear washed through Emily. Who's they? Jin-woo hesitated, then reached for a secure tablet. This information came at considerable cost. He pulled up a photo, Chairman Kang meeting with a man Emily recognized from international finance news, Jung Hyun-soo, billionaire chairman of Han-young Group, with rumored ties to government corruption scandals. Kang has been Jung's puppet for years. They place people like Pearson in companies to establish laundering channels. When I started investigating Pearson because of you, I accidentally uncovered their entire network. So I'm just collateral damage in your corporate war? Jin-woo's hand caught hers, his touch unexpectedly gentle. No, you were the catalyst who finally gave me the opening I needed to bring down the men responsible for Jisoo's death, but that doesn't make your safety any less important to me. The intensity in his eyes made Emily's pulse quicken. Why would my safety matter beyond what I represent? Because in watching you fight, seeing your strength despite fear, I began to see you. Jin-woo's voice softened. Not as a symbol or a means to justice, but as someone He stopped, vulnerability vanishing behind his mask of control. Someone I respect. The unfinished sentiment hung between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Emily's phone buzzed, an email from HR requesting her presence at a morning meeting. Attached was a formal complaint from David Pearson alleging she had engaged in inappropriate relationship with leadership to secure preferential treatment. "They're moving faster than anticipated," Jin-woo read over her shoulder. "We need to accelerate our timeline." What timeline? The question remained unanswered as Jin-woo's security team burst in. "Sir, there's been a breach at Ms. Drake's apartment. Her computer and files are gone." Jin-woo's expression transformed into something Emily hadn't witnessed before, cold, controlled fury that reminded her of exactly who he was beyond the walls of legitimate business. "They've declared war," he said quietly, each word precise as a blade.
He turned to Emily, decision crystallizing in his eyes. "I've respected your boundaries about how we handle this, but those boundaries have put you in greater danger. I need your permission to use methods you may find uncomfortable." The request itself was a revelation. This man who operated in shadows was asking her consent before crossing lines. "What will happen to Pearson?" she asked. "Justice," Jin-woo answered simply, "but not through courts that can be corrupted." Emily thought of the women in that red file, of Jin-woo's sister, of her own bruises finally fading. "Do what you need to do," she whispered, crossing a moral threshold she couldn't uncross. Jin-woo nodded once, then spoke quietly to Sun-ja in Korean. The security chief's eyes widened slightly before she bowed and departed. "You should know something," Jin-woo said after they were alone. "This fight has become personal for reasons beyond my sister or justice." He stepped closer, the careful distance he'd always maintained dissolving. "I find myself compromised where you're concerned," he admitted, voice rough with emotion he rarely revealed. "My desire to protect you exceeds professional obligation or moral duty." The confession hung between them, reshaping everything Emily thought she understood about their alliance. Hello, lovelies at Heart of Seoul. Are you feeling the tension? This story is just heating up. If you're enjoying Emily and Jin-woo's dangerous journey, make sure you hit subscribe below and join our family. What do you think Jin-woo will do next? Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, back to our story as everything changes. Before Emily could respond, Sun-ja returned, her expression grave. "Sir, Pearson is on the move, and he's not alone." Jin-woo's phone rang, Chairman Kong's name flashing on screen. As he answered, his expression revealed nothing, but Emily saw his knuckles whiten. "I understand. Finally," he said. "Tomorrow, then." He turned to Emily, his eyes containing a storm. "They've made their demand. Either I deliver you and all evidence to Chairman Kong tomorrow, or they release fabricated proof that you've been embezzling company funds." "They're framing me," Emily whispered. "Yes, and they've made one critical mistake." Jin-woo's expression shifted to something predatory. "They've threatened someone under my protection, someone I've come to care for more than they could possibly understand." In that moment, Emily realized the true danger wasn't just the powerful men hunting her. It was how completely she'd already surrendered her heart to the most dangerous man of all. Dawn broke over Seoul as Emily stared out from Jin-woo's guest room, her life dismantled in 24 hours, her reputation, career, and safety all balanced on a knife's edge. The evidence against Pearson and his powerful backers now seemed insignificant compared to what they'd manufactured against her.
Jin-woo had insisted she remain under his protection overnight, placing armed guards around the property. The gesture should have comforted her. Instead, it underscored how thoroughly she'd been pulled into his dangerous world, a world where problems weren't solved through HR meetings or legal briefs, but through power plays with life-altering consequences. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jin-woo entered, impeccably dressed despite the early hour, though the shadows beneath his eyes revealed a sleepless night. "There's been a development," he said, offering her coffee.
Pearson made contact with a known fixer last night, someone who handles problems permanently. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the cup. They want me dead. Yes, which means they're more desperate than I anticipated. Jin-woo's voice remained controlled, but Emily had learned to read the tension in his jaw. The meeting with Kang is a trap. Then why are we still going? Because I've arranged a trap of my own. Something dark flashed across Jin-woo's expression. But you need to understand what that entails. Once I move against them publicly, there's no returning to your previous life. The ripple effects will touch everything. The implications settled heavily in the room. This wasn't just about evidence or justice anymore. It was about dismantling power structures that would fight viciously to survive. "What about you?" Emily asked, quietly. "You're risking everything you've built." Jin-woo's expression softened momentarily. Some things are worth the sacrifice. The unspoken emotion behind those words made Emily's heart constrict. Whatever was growing between them had developed in circumstances too extreme to trust, yet something about Jin-woo's protective fierceness felt like the most honest connection she'd experienced in years. Her phone rang, Min-ji's name flashing on screen. "Emily? Oh God, are you okay? There are security guards clearing out your desk. HR is saying... They're saying you stole confidential client information. Everyone's talking about you and Mr. Seo. Pearson is telling people you've been intimate to gain access to financial systems." Emily closed her eyes, the character assassination more painful than expected, despite her preparation. "Min-ji, listen carefully. Don't get involved. Distance yourself from me publicly. But, please, it's not safe." After the call ended, Emily found Jin-woo watching her, his expression unreadable. "The personal cost is beginning," he observed quietly. "This is your last opportunity to choose differently. I can still arrange your departure to Singapore." Emily straightened, something hardening inside her. Running won't stop men like Pearson, it just gives them new victims. Jin-woo stepped closer, the careful boundaries he'd maintained dissolving. "Then I need you to trust me completely for the next 12 hours. No questions, no hesitation. Even when what I do seems..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Extreme."
The request should have terrified her. Instead, it crystallized everything Emily had been feeling since falling into his arms that day in the boardroom, the inexplicable certainty that, despite his dangerous reputation, this man would protect her at any cost. "I trust you," she said simply. Something shifted in Jin-woo's expression, relief mingled with another emotion too complex to name. His hand rose to her face, fingertips barely brushing her cheek in a touch so gentle it made her breath catch. The moment shattered as Sunja burst in. "Sir, Chairman Kang just moved the meeting forward. They're expecting you both in 30 minutes. Jin-woo's expression immediately hardened to granite. "They're trying to disrupt our preparation." He turned to Emily. "Are you ready?" Before she could answer, her phone chimed with a news alert. She opened it, her blood turning to ice. Splashed across Seoul's largest business publication was a photo of her entering Jin-woo's home last night, alongside financial documents allegedly proving her embezzlement. The headline screamed, "Tae-ho scandal, CEO's affair covers financial crimes." "They've gone public," Emily whispered, the last fragments of her former life crumbling. Her reputation, her career, everything she'd built through years of discipline and sacrifice destroyed in a single headline. Jin-woo took her phone, his expression darkening as he read. When he looked up, the controlled businessman had vanished. In his place stood someone Emily had glimpsed only in fragments, the man behind the legitimate facade, the one whose name was whispered in fear. "Now they face what happens when you touch something that belongs to me," he said, his voice a quiet promise that sent chills down Emily's spine. The possessive declaration should have offended her. Instead, it ignited something primal, a recognition that in this darkest hour, she had aligned herself with a force capable of salvation or destruction, or perhaps both. The Taeho headquarters lobby felt like entering an execution chamber. Security guards flanked the entrance, their eyes tracking Emily and Jin-woo with cold precision. Employees whispered behind hands as they passed, the scandal headlines having spread like wildfire. Emily held her head high, though each judging glance cut like glass. In the elevator, Jin-woo squeezed her hand briefly. Remember, everything that happens next is calculated. Follow my lead without question. The boardroom doors opened to reveal Chairman Kang seated at the head of the table, Pearson and 3 board members flanking him. Their expressions ranged from smug certainty to barely concealed hostility. Jin-woo, Kang said, deliberately omitting his title, I see you've brought your associate. His gaze slid over Emily with calculated dismissal. Jin-woo guided Emily to seats opposite them. Chairman, I believe you've called this meeting to discuss serious allegations. Indeed, Kang slid a folder across the polished table, evidence of Miss Drake's systematic theft of company funds, facilitated by her relationship with you. The board has unanimously voted to terminate her employment and file criminal charges.
Pearson smirked, victory etched in every line of his face. Jin-woo didn't touch the folder. Instead, he placed his phone on the table. Before we proceed, I'd like to introduce someone. The door opened, admitting a slight Korean woman whose elegant appearance contrasted sharply with her haunted eyes. Emily recognized her instantly from photographs in Jin-woo's home, Ji-soo, his sister. Pearson's face drained of color. My sister didn't die 7 years ago, Jin-woo said, his voice carrying quiet power. She attempted suicide, yes, but she survived. I've kept her recovery private while she healed from what you did to her, Pearson. Ji-soo spoke softly in Korean, her gaze never leaving Pearson's face as she described, in devastating detail, his systematic harassment and the institutional betrayal that followed. Kang cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. While unfortunate, Ms. Seo's personal allegations are irrelevant to today's matter. They establish pattern, Jin-woo interrupted, as do these. Soon-ja entered, distributing identical red folders to each board member, copies of the file Jin-woo had shown Emily, now expanded with testimonies from 12 women across 3 companies. More importantly, Jin-woo continued as the board members flipped through the damning contents, they provide context for the financial crimes you've been facilitating, Chairman. He activated the room's display screen, revealing complex financial diagrams tracing money through shell companies. This isn't just about sexual harassment. Pearson's primary function has been establishing laundering channels within each company he joins. His predatory behavior toward women is simply his personal indulgence. Emily watched comprehension dawn across the board members' faces as Jin-woo methodically exposed the corruption at Taeho's heart, how Kang had inserted Pearson to facilitate moving Jong Hyung-soo's illegal funds through legitimate business operations. You have no proof, Kang sputtered, though his confidence had visibly cracked. Actually, Jin-woo replied, we have something better than proof. We have a witness. The boardroom door opened once more. Emily gasped audibly as Jong Hyung-soo himself entered, the billionaire supposedly behind the entire operation. Chairman Jong has been cooperating with authorities for the past month in exchange for immunity regarding certain past indiscretions. Jong nodded solemnly. Everything Mr. Seo has presented is accurate. Chairman Kang has been managing my illegal operations for years, with Mr. Pearson as his implementation specialist. This is absurd, Pearson protested, desperation edging his voice. You're believing the word of a criminal? What about the evidence against her? He jabbed a finger toward Emily. Fabricated, Jin-woo said calmly, by the same people who created false evidence against previous victims. The difference is Miss Drake had protection you didn't anticipate. Emily felt a surge of warmth at his words, even as she marveled at the elaborate trap he'd constructed. This hadn't been improvised in a day. Jin-woo had been building this case for years, waiting for the perfect moment to spring.
Kang stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. We'll resolve this through proper legal channels." "I'm afraid not." The new voice came from a serious-looking woman in the doorway, flanked by uniformed officers. "Financial Crimes Prosecutor Yoon Min-hee, Chairman Kang and Mr. Pearson, you're both under investigation for fraud, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy." As officers moved forward, Pearson lunged suddenly across the table toward Emily, his face contorted with hate. "You destroyed everything. Jin-woo moved with shocking speed, intercepting Pearson with a precise strike that left him gasping on the boardroom floor. The controlled businessman vanished completely in that moment, replaced by someone who clearly knew exactly how much force to apply without killing. "You never touch her again," Jin-woo said, his voice deadly quiet. As officers led Pearson and Kang away, the remaining board members stared at Jin-woo with new understanding and unmistakable fear. Emily felt lightheaded with the sudden shift. In 20 minutes, everything had transformed. The trap she'd feared had become salvation. The darkness had broken. Justice, not through conventional channels that had failed so many women, but through Jin-woo's particular brand of ruthless strategy, had finally arrived. Yet as the adrenaline ebbed, new questions emerged. What happened now? The scandal headlines wouldn't disappear overnight. Her reputation remained in tatters. And Jin-woo, what did this victory mean for whatever had been growing between them? As though reading her thoughts, Jin-woo approached, his public mask slipping just enough to reveal genuine concern. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "The fight to restore your name will be another battle entirely. But if you'll allow it," he hesitated, vulnerability briefly visible, "I'd like to fight it with you." The offer held layers beyond professional alliance, an invitation into something deeper, more personal, more dangerous perhaps, but infinitely more real than anything Emily had known before. "Yes," she answered simply, taking his offered hand. The week following Pearson and Kang's arrest unfolded like a fever dream. Financial news outlets exploded with stories of the corruption scheme, while tabloids fixated on Jin-woo and Emily's supposed affair. Though prosecutors publicly confirmed the fabricated nature of the embezzlement allegations, public opinion remained divided. Taeho's stock fluctuated wildly as the market processed the scandal's implications. For Emily, vindication came with its own price. Former colleagues either avoided her entirely or approached with uncomfortable curiosity. Her professional reputation, though legally cleared, remained tarnished by salacious headlines and lingering doubts. "Public memory is short but vicious," Jin-woo observed as they reviewed media coverage in his office. "The narrative needs to change." Emily studied his profile, still adjusting to this new dynamic between them. Since that moment in the boardroom, something fundamental had shifted. The careful distance Jin-woo maintained had dissolved, replaced by a tentative intimacy neither of them had fully acknowledged.
"How do we change it?" she asked. "By giving them something they love more than scandal. Redemption." Jin-woo revealed his strategy. Emily would lead Taeho's newly formed Ethics and Compliance Division, creating industry-leading protections against harassment and financial impropriety. "You're offering me a promotion?" Emily asked, stunned. "After everything?" "I'm offering you power," Jin-woo corrected, "to rebuild systems that failed you and others, to ensure what happened to you, to Jisoo, never happens again." The offer was elegant, transforming victim into architect of change, yet questions lingered beneath the professional solution. "And us?" Emily asked quietly. "What happens to whatever this is between us. Jin-woo's expression softened. That depends entirely on what you want it to be. Before she could answer, Sanja entered with urgent news. Jang Hyun-soo had been found dead in his home, an apparent suicide. The timing, hours before his scheduled formal testimony, couldn't be coincidental. Kang has powerful friends beyond Jung, Jin-woo said grimly. This isn't over. That evening, as Emily prepared to return to her apartment for the first time since the scandal broke, an unmarked envelope arrived containing photos of her entering Jin-woo's home, surveillance shots of her daily routine, and a single message: even Seo can't protect everyone. Jin-woo's reaction was controlled fury when she called him. I'm sending security to bring you back here, now. No, Emily said, surprising herself with her certainty. I won't live in fear again. That's what they want, to make me hide. Silence stretched across the line before Jin-woo spoke, his voice tight with emotion. Then I'm coming to you. When he arrived 30 minutes later, something had changed in his demeanor. The calculated businessman had vanished completely, leaving a man whose concern transcended strategy or obligation. You've never asked about the rumors, about who I really am beyond Taeho. Emily met his gaze steadily. I didn't need to ask. I've seen enough. Not everything. Jin-woo moved closer, the confession emerging like something physically painful. My family's connections, the power that allowed me to trap Kang and Pearson, it comes from places I've tried to leave behind, places that make me unworthy of someone like you. The vulnerability in his admission stunned her. This man who orchestrated justice like warfare was laying his darkest truth before her, expecting rejection. You think I don't know who you are? Emily stepped closer, erasing the distance between them. I've seen both sides of you, Jin-woo, the businessman and the shadow, and I choose both. Something broke in his expression, control giving way to raw emotion as his hand cupped her face. They'll never stop coming for you as long as you're with me. My world will always bring danger.
Then we'll face it together, Emily said simply. Because your world also brought justice when the legitimate one failed. It brought truth when systems buried it. It brought me you. The words hung between them, the final barrier dissolving as Jin-woo pulled her into a kiss that contained everything they'd left unspoken. Protection transmuted to passion, alliance deepened to something far more profound. When they finally separated, Jin-woo pressed his forehead against hers. We end this tonight, completely. Hours later, Jin-woo's security team implemented what he called the nuclear option, simultaneously releasing evidence to every major news outlet identifying the entire network behind Kang and Jung's operation. Politicians, judges, executives, all exposed in a single devastating information wave. The only protection against powerful enemies, Jin-woo explained as they watched the breaking news together, is ensuring they have nowhere left to hide. As dawn broke over Seoul, Emily's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Miss Drake, came a woman's voice. This is Prosecutor Yoon. We've just arrested 3 more executives based on the evidence released last night. I thought you should know. It's over. Truly over this time. In the golden morning light, Emily turned to Jin-woo, seeing not just the powerful CEO or the dangerous protector, but the man who had risked everything, his company, his carefully constructed legitimate life, even his heart to stand beside her. No, she said softly, taking his hand. I think it's just beginning. 6 months transformed everything. Spring bloomed across Seoul. Cherry blossoms dusting the city in delicate pink as life found new patterns after the storm. Taeho Investments had weathered the scandal, emerging stronger under restructured leadership. Emily's ethics and compliance division had become the company's crown jewel, attracting attention throughout Asian financial markets for its innovative approach to corporate accountability. 3 of Pearson's previous victims now served on her team, their combined experiences reshaping policies that had once failed them. The Singapore Times is calling it the Drake method. You're officially famous for something besides scandal. Emily smiled, touching the article with quiet pride. Redemption had come, not through hiding or running, but through transforming broken systems from within. The whispers still followed occasionally. Speculation about their relationship with Jin-woo never completely faded, but they no longer carried power over her. The board approved your proposal, by the way, Min-ji added. Taeho will fund legal representation for harassment victims at 50 companies next year. After Min-ji left, Emily stood by her office window, gazing toward the executive floor where Jin-woo worked. Their professional boundaries remained carefully maintained during business hours, a mutual decision that protected both her authority and the integrity of her department. Yet behind closed doors, they had built something neither had believed possible, a partnership of equals, vulnerable and strong in precisely the ways each had once considered weakness.
Her phone chimed with his message. Dinner at the Hanok tonight? I have news. The traditional house had become their sanctuary, a place where Jin-woo shed the armor he wore in public. There, Emily had learned the full truth of his family's complicated legacy, the grandfather who built fortune through questionable means, Jin-woo's determination to create legitimate business, and the shadows he couldn't fully escape despite his efforts. There, too, she had witnessed his gradual transformation, the man who once solved problems through controlled power, now increasingly seeking justice through reformed systems she helped design. That evening, as they walked through the courtyard garden where water flowed over stone, Jin-woo seemed unusually contemplative. Pearson's sentencing was finalized today, he said. 15 years. Kang received 12. Emily nodded, the news bringing closure rather than satisfaction. And the others? The prosecutors have dismantled most of the network. Those who escaped legal consequences have lost power, connections, reputation. Jin-woo stopped walking, turning to face her directly. It's truly finished now. The weight of those words settled between them. For months, fragments of threat had lingered, final tremors after the earthquake. Now, at last, solid ground. I've been thinking about legacy, Jin-woo continued, taking her hands, about what we build that outlasts us. Taeho was my attempt to create something legitimate from complicated foundations, but the ethics division, your vision, has become something greater than I imagined. Emily studied his face, sensing deeper currents beneath his words. I'm stepping down as CEO. What? Why would you? To build something new, with you. Jin-woo's eyes held hers with uncharacteristic vulnerability. The Taeho Foundation, independent from the company, focused entirely on supporting workplace justice initiatives. No more divided loyalties between business interests and ethical imperatives. The proposal took Emily's breath away, not just for its professional implications, but for what it revealed about Jin-woo's evolution. This man who once inhabited shadows now sought to create light. Partners? She asked softly. His smile reached his eyes, transforming his entire face. In everything. As cherry blossoms drifted around them, Jin-woo drew her close. You fell into my arms that day in the boardroom and everything changed. You showed me justice doesn't always require shadows. Sometimes it simply requires courage. Emily thought of how far they'd traveled, from bruises and fear to this moment of peaceful strength, from systems that failed to systems they're rebuilding, from falling apart to falling in love with the one man everyone feared, who had proven worthy of something far greater than fear, trust. Some falls, she whispered against his lips, lead exactly where you're meant to be. Hello, my lovelies at Heart of Seoul. I hope this story touched your heart as much as it did mine.
Tell me in the comments which moment between Emily and Jin-woo moved you most. Was it when he caught her in the boardroom, when he confronted Pearson, or this final scene of them building a new future together? Join our Heart of Seoul family by subscribing if you haven't already. There are so many more stories of courage, love, and redemption waiting for you.